By the time Ruby heard the scream, 3 nannies had already run out of that house and sworn never to return. They all told the same story. The baby wasn't normal. He didn't just cry when he was hungry or tired. He screamed like something was tearing him apart from the inside. Hour after hour, day after day, no one could calm him, no one could sleep, no one could stay. Inside the stone gates and manicured hedges, the Miller mansion looked like a magazine cover. Outside, it looked like success. Inside, it sounded like a hospital emergency room that never, ever quieted down. 2-year-old Noah, the only child of millionaire couple Christopher and Amanda Miller, had become a problem no amount of money could fix. They had tried it all: specialists, expensive formulas, imported rocking cribs, sound machines, sleep trainers, private pediatricians who charged more per hour than most people made in a week. Nothing worked. The child's blue eyes were always red around the edges. His tiny fists were always clenched. His voice was always raw. On Ruby's first day, no one mentioned any of that. They handed her a uniform and a list. Kitchen, bathrooms, floors, don't go into the nursery, the house manager said briskly. The nanny handles that, you just clean around it. That was it. No warming welcome, no explanation for the dull grey exhaustion in everyone's faces. Ruby nodded, because Ruby always nodded. She needed the job. She wasn't here to make friends or cause trouble. She started in the kitchen, wiping down marble counters so white they almost hurt her eyes. Everything gleamed. Stainless steel, crystal, fresh flowers that would be thrown away in 3 days and replaced by new ones. And then she heard it. A cry, not the soft, whiny protest of a cranky toddler. A sharp, desperate scream that cut straight through the expensive silence and froze the rag in Ruby's hand. Her heart stuttered. That sound. She knew that sound. She stood very still, one hand flattening over her chest, as if she could hold her own memories down. In her mind, for a split second, it wasn't Noah screaming. It was another baby, a tiny brown boy in a cramped apartment years ago, a boy named Malik, whose cries everyone said were just colic until it was too late. Ruby swallowed, the kitchen spinning just a little. The crying went on, and on, high, panicked, ragged at the edges. No one was moving, no footsteps on the stairs, no soothing voice. Just that raw, begging sound pouring from the ceiling and into Ruby's bones. She walked to the bottom of the grand staircase almost without realizing it, her cleaning rag still in her hand, rubber gloves still on. She looked up toward the second floor where the nursery was, where the rules said she didn't belong. Her common sense told her to turn around. Her paycheck told her to stay in the kitchen. Her past told her she could not ignore that sound. Not again. Upstairs, a door slammed. Someone muttered. The crying hit a higher pitch, then broke into gasping sobs like the baby couldn't catch his breath. Ruby's feet moved. 1 step, 2, 3. Halfway up the stairs, she stopped, suddenly aware of where she was, of who she was in this house, a middle-aged black cleaning lady with no medical degree and no permission. She heard another voice then, a woman's, strained and annoyed. "I can't do this, Mrs. Miller. I'm sorry, I just can't. He doesn't stop. I've tried everything." A second voice, brittle with panic. "So you're quitting too? You can't just walk out, Olivia." The baby wailed, drowning both of them out. In that moment, as Ruby stood on the stairs, something subtle slid into place in her mind. Not a vision, not a miracle, a detail. The asterisk pattern asterisk of Noah's crying, the way it rose and fell. The little grunt on the inhale, the arching of his body she could glimpse through the doorway when it opened for a second. The way his legs pulled up to his chest, like he was trying to curl away from a fire inside him. Ruby had seen that before. She had heard it. She had held it in her own shaking arms. Her fingers tightened around the railing until her knuckles ached. She knew she was about to cross a line that could cost her this job. This house was run on rules, and one of them was simple. Staff stayed in their lane. Cleaning ladies did not question nannies. They did not question millionaires. But the sound coming from that room, she couldn't walk away. If you were Ruby, a stranger in a rich family's house, standing on those stairs with that scream in your ears, would you risk everything and go up? Or tell yourself it wasn't your business and turn back? Tell me in the comments what you'd honestly do. Ruby took a breath that trembled in her chest and lifted her foot toward the next step. What would she find when she finally stepped into the room everyone told her to stay out of? And once she saw the truth, would the Millers let her walk back down those stairs the same way she came up? The first time Ruby saw Noah's face, it wasn't the tears that jolted her. It was his eyes. They were wide and wild, yes, but there was something else in them too, something that didn't fit on a 2-year-old's face. Fear, real fear. She reached the landing just as the nursery door flew open. A young woman in a wrinkled pastel blouse stormed out, cheeks streaked with tears, baby spit on her shoulder, her hands shaking with frustration. "I'm done," the nanny, Olivia, blurted, almost running into Ruby. "You couldn't pay me enough to stay another night in this nightmare." Behind her, Amanda Miller hovered at the doorway, immaculate in a cream silk blouse that probably cost more than Ruby's car. Her hair was perfect. Her expression was not. "Please," Amanda hissed under her breath, trying to keep her voice down. "You can't just quit. We have tried everyone asterisk. I'll double your salary, triple it. Whatever you want." Olivia laughed, but there was no humor in it, only something brittle and broken. "It's not about the money, Mrs. Miller. That child needs, I don't even know what he needs. A priest, an exorcist, a miracle. Because no human being can do this." And then Ruby heard it again, louder now that the door was open, a keening, ragged scream that sounded like it was tearing the tiny boy's throat apart. She stepped to the side as Olivia shouldered past her and clattered down the stairs, suitcase banging against each step. Amanda pressed her fingertips to her temples for a second, then caught sight of Ruby. "You," she snapped, more out of panic than rudeness. "You're the new cleaner, right, Ruby?" Ruby nodded, eyes already drawn past her into the room. "Don't just stand there. Can you bring up some more towels later? We've run out again." Amanda's voice wobbled on the last word, but she turned away quickly like she didn't want Ruby to see it. "Yes, ma'am," Ruby murmured, but she didn't move, not yet. From where she stood, she could see just enough. A white nursery that looked like it belonged in a catalogue. A crib that cost more than her rent for 6 months. A tiny body writhing in the middle of it, back arched, legs pulled up tight, fists pounding at his own stomach as if trying to hit the pain away. "Noah," he gulped for air between screams, his chest hitching, little veins popping at his temples. His face was red, but not the flushed red of a clean cry. It was splotchy, mottled. There were faint scratch marks along his neck like he'd been clawing at something that hurt. Ruby felt her own throat tighten. Malik used to do that. Back when everyone said it was just colic. Back when the free clinic told her to wait it out because she was a panicked young mom who watched too much TV. Back before the ambulance. Before the diagnosis. Before the tiny white sheet. Ruby stepped closer, stopping just at the invisible line where the plush nursery carpet met the polished hallway wood. "Ma'am," she heard herself say softly. Is he sick?" Amanda exhaled a harsh sound. "If he was sick, that would almost be easier. They say he's healthy, perfectly healthy, just strong-willed, sensitive, spirited." She spat the last word out like it tasted bitter. "He hasn't slept more than an hour at a time in months. He screams like this until he passes out. Then he wakes up and starts again." Ruby's gaze flicked to the side. On the dresser, rows of formula cans lined up like soldiers. The labels were a blur of pastel colors and fancy promises. Gentle asterisk, premium asterisk, asterisk comfort asterisk, probiotic asterisk. So many choices, so many chances to be wrong. The smell of the room hit her then. Not bad, just sharp, powdery, perfumed. The laundry detergent on the tiny clothes, the scented wipes, the lotion on his skin. Layers of baby smell, but not the real kind. Noah screamed again, his little hands curling into claws. Everything in Ruby's body wanted to cross that line, to scoop him up, hold him on her chest, rock him the way she'd wished someone would let her when Malik screamed like that. But she didn't, not yet. She had learned the hard way what happened when a black woman in a rich white house stepped where she hadn't been invited. If stories like this hit a nerve for you, the narrator might tell the viewer here, make sure you hit that button and subscribe so you don't miss how this one unfolds. Ruby swallowed her instincts and curled her gloved hands into fists to keep from reaching out. "Do the doctors know he cries like this?" she asked quietly. Amanda laughed, a brittle, humorless sound. We just paid $1,500 to tell us he's developmentally advanced and needs more stimulation. More stimulation, she repeated, looking around the already overstuffed room. Look at this place. He has more stimulation than an amusement park. Noah's scream broke into a gasping cough. For 1 second, his eyes locked on Ruby's through the bars of the crib. She felt punched in the chest. That look, that wild, pleading look. Not pick me up because I'm spoiled. Help me. Something is wrong and nobody hears me. Ruby's heartbeat thudded louder in her ears. In that second, she realized something no one in that house wanted to admit out loud. This wasn't a behavior problem. It didn't sound like defiance or manipulation. It sounded like pain. But how do you tell a woman who has bought everything money can buy that the one thing missing is the one thing she can't order overnight? A different way of listening. Ruby drew in a breath. Ma'am, did anyone ever check if he might be allergic to something, or if something he's eating is hurting his stomach? Amanda's jaw tightened. We've had every test, every scan. They say he's fine. Ruby nodded slowly, but her eyes drifted back to Noah's contorted body, the way he pulled his knees to his chest, the way he flinched whenever the air conditioning kicked on and a faint draft blew across his face. Fine, he didn't look fine. Ruby had a choice to make. Stay in her place and keep her job, or follow that uneasy whisper in her chest that said there was something here everyone had missed, something small but crucial. Would Amanda listen if Ruby pushed even a little harder? Or would one more word from the cleaning lady be all it took to have her escorted right back out of that perfect front door? The house fell silent that evening in a way that didn't feel peaceful. It felt like everyone was holding their breath. The third nanny's departure left a hollow space where rushed footsteps and hushed lullabies had once been. Now it was just the hum of the air conditioning, the distant clink of ice in crystal glasses downstairs, and Noah's crying. Always Noah's crying. By midnight, the staff had retreated to their quarters. The house manager's door was shut. The cooks had gone home. The Millers were alone upstairs with their perfectly healthy child who never stopped screaming. Everyone, that is, except Ruby, she couldn't sleep. She lay on the narrow bed in the small staff room off the laundry, staring at the ceiling. Each sob from the floor above seemed to land directly on her chest. She tried to remind herself, this wasn't her baby, this wasn't her business. Her job was to mop floors and scrub toilets and send money to her sister back home, not to fix what rich people broke. But then she remembered Malik again. How many nights had she lain awake just like this, listening to cries that doctors shrugged at? How many times had she been told, some babies are just fussy, while her child's insides were quietly tearing themselves apart? The memory felt like a weight on her ribs. Another scream echoed. This one ended in a choking gasp. That did it. Ruby swung her legs over the side of the bed and slid her feet into her worn sneakers. She didn't bother with the uniform. Just wrapped her shawl around her shoulders and crept out, every floorboard creak sounding like a shout in the quiet corridor. Upstairs, a light glowed under the nursery door. She paused outside it, hand hovering over the knob. She could hear Amanda's voice, ragged with exhaustion. Please, Noah, please, baby, mommy is so tired, please just sleep. But the baby's body didn't understand words like please. It only knew pain. Ruby closed her eyes for a second. If she knocked, she could be sent away. If she walked back downstairs, she'd never forgive herself if something happened. Her knuckles brushed the door once, a soft tap. Silence from the other side for a heartbeat. Then come in, Amanda's voice, flat and resigned. Ruby pushed the door open. Amanda sat on the plush carpet in sweatpants and a silk camisole, hair falling out of its previously perfect bun. Her mascara had smudged under her eyes. She looked less like a billionaire's wife and more like what she was underneath all that, a mother on the edge of breaking. In the crib, Noah thrashed, his back bowed, his little mouth open in a sound that had long since turned from cry to scream. I'm sorry, ma'am, Ruby said quietly. I couldn't sleep. I just wanted to see if you needed anything. Amanda let out a bitter little laugh. Unless you can perform miracles, there's nothing you can do. Their eyes met. It was a risk, but Ruby took it. Can I try holding him, just for a minute? Amanda opened her mouth to say no. You could see it, the the instinct to protect, to control, to keep this stranger at a distance. You could also see something else, pure bone-deep desperation. She hesitated. He doesn't like strangers. He screams worse when someone new touches him. He is already screaming, Ruby said gently. Maybe it won't hurt to try. For a long moment, they just looked at each other. Then Amanda nodded once, a small surrender. Ruby stepped to the crib, hands suddenly unsure. She had bathed this house in bleach and soap, but she had not expected to be entrusted with the one thing in it that really mattered. She slid her arms under Noah's tiny body, careful, slow. He felt hot, not feverish, but flushed from the endless crying. His muscles were tight as springs. The second Ruby lifted him, he arched away from her, shrieking, fists pounding at her chest. "It's okay, baby," she murmured, her voice low, the way her mother used to talk to her when thunderstorms rattled their windows. "I know, I hear you, I hear you." Instead of cradling him like people normally did, she turned him so his belly rested against her shoulder, his legs tucked up under him, his chest pressed to hers. One hand supported his bottom, the other pressed gently, carefully against his back, just below his ribcage. She began to sway, not big rocking motions, just a slow side to side, like a heartbeat you could see. At first, nothing changed. He screamed in her ear, every muscle in his tiny body rigid. Amanda watched, ready to snatch him back at the first sign of danger. Then, little by little, Ruby's hand felt something shift. A burp, small but violent, forced its way out of Noah's chest. Then another. Then a long, shuddering exhale that sounded almost like a sob of relief. His screams dropped from a 10 to a 7, then to a 5. He was still crying, but now it was different. Less like a siren, more like a whimper. Ruby kept swaying, murmuring nonsense, feeling the gas move under her palm, the tension slowly leaking from his body. After a few minutes, he wasn't screaming anymore. He was gulping, hiccuping, his fingers tangled in the collar of Ruby's worn t-shirt. Amanda's hands flew to her mouth. "How did you do that?" she whispered. Ruby didn't say, "Because no one ever showed me this trick when Malik was dying, and I had to learn it too late by watching nurses in the ICU. She just said, "His little belly, it's full of air. Maybe whatever he's drinking, fighting him." Amanda stared as if seeing her for the first time, not just as a cleaner, but as a woman with knowledge that hadn't come from a textbook or a YouTube video. Silence filled the room. The good kind this time. This might just be one of those nights that changes everything for this family, a storyteller might say here. And if you've ever been in a room where something shifted like this, what would you have done in Ruby's place? Would you have stepped in, or stayed in your lane and kept quiet? Tell me in the comments. Noah's breaths grew slower against Ruby's shoulder, but even as he calmed, Ruby's eyes traveled over his little body, the faint red rash along his jawline, the way his fingertips scratched at his neck, the almost invisible flinch every time the cool air from the vent above touched his skin. Calm was good, but calm wasn't the same as safe. Had she just stumbled onto the first clue in a much bigger puzzle? And if she pulled at that thread, would this fragile moment of trust between her and Amanda hold, or come apart completely? By morning, the story of what Ruby had done had already spread through the house. Not because anyone had told it with warmth or gratitude, because it had raised questions. The house manager, Miss Green, cornered Ruby in the pantry after breakfast, her lips pressed into a thin line. "I heard you were in the nursery last night," she said, folding her arms. "That is * not part of your job description." Ruby kept her eyes lowered. "Yes, ma'am, Mrs. Miller let me in. The baby, he was having a hard night." "The baby always has a hard night," Miss Green snapped. "That doesn't mean every staff member gets to come and go as they please. Boundaries exist for a reason. Don't overstep again." But as Miss Green turned away, Ruby noticed the older woman's fingers trembled ever so slightly as she reached for her coffee cup. Everyone in this house was exhausted. Everyone was fraying at the edges. Later that day, a new car pulled up to the front of the mansion. Not a Nannies beat-up sedan this time, but a sleek black SUV. A woman in a tailored navy pantsuit stepped out, clutching a leather briefcase. "Who's that?" one of the gardeners murmured to Ruby as they both watched from the side door. "Sleep consultant," the house manager answered before Ruby could. Best in the state, apparently. Ruby's stomach clenched. Best in the state. Maury degrees, Maury money, Maury expertise. Inside, the consultant spoke in calm, polished tones. Ruby caught pieces as she vacuumed the hallway outside the living room. Strong-willed child, needs clear boundaries. Crying it out can be healthy if done correctly. He has to learn self-soothing. Ruby bit the inside of her cheek so hard she tasted blood. Self-soothing was a beautiful concept for a child whose body wasn't screaming from the inside. That afternoon, the consultant toured the nursery, taking notes, suggesting gadgets. The new plan sounded more like boot camp than bedtime. Strict schedules, no picking up during nighttime cries, more independence. That night, the screaming started earlier. Noah had gotten used to the brief mercy of being held on Ruby's shoulder. Now, when no one came, his cries sharpened into something frantic, animal. Ruby stood in the hallway, fingers digging into the handle of her mop as she listened. He has to learn, the consultant's voice drifted through the door. If you go in now, you're rewarding the behavior. This doesn't sound like behavior, Amanda said, her voice breaking. It sounds like he's dying. He's not, the consultant replied smoothly. You're just used to rescuing him. Tonight we let him work through it. 2 hours passed. The screams didn't weaken. They turned hoarse, yes, but not softer. Just rower, less like a tantrum, more like a throat shredding itself. Ruby couldn't take it. She found Christopher in the kitchen, hunched over the island with a glass of whiskey, his suit jacket off, his tie loosened. He stared at the marble without really seeing it. Sir, Ruby said quietly. He blinked like he hadn't heard his own name in a while. Yeah, do you think maybe he is crying like that because something is hurting him? Not because he is bad. Christopher tipped back his drink, swallowed hard, then set the glass down with more force than necessary. You think we haven't thought of that? He said, his tone sharp but not unkind, just shredded. We've seen 6 specialists in 3 months. We've done scans, blood work, allergy panels. Everything comes back normal. Sometimes the tests don't see the right thing, Ruby said, voice low. Sometimes it's something small. How he eats, what he was eating, the air he breathes. He stared at her then, really stared, like he was trying to decide whether this woman with cracked hands and second-hand sneakers could possibly know something all his experts had missed. Silence stretched between them. If you care about how tiny details in a life can change everything, the narrator might murmur here, go ahead and hit subscribe so you're here when the smallest clue in this story finally gets uncovered. Christopher shook his head slowly. You sound like my mother, he muttered. Old wives' tales and home remedies. We don't need herbs and prayers, Ruby. We need science. He stood abruptly. Thank you for your concern, really. But this is beyond your pay grade. The words weren't cruel, but they drew a clear line. Ruby nodded, retreating, but her spine stiffened. Science had failed her baby. Old wives' tales hadn't saved him either. What had saved other children she'd held since then in her nieces, nephews, neighbors? Simple things. Food changed. Detergent swapped. A moldy windowsill was cleaned. A mother taught to hold her baby in a different way. The next morning, when she went to strip Noah's crib sheets for laundry, the sleep consultant was already gone, paid handsomely to leave behind a plan and a trail of fresh heartbreak. You didn't need to be an expert to see the evidence of the night. Noah's voice was nearly gone, his cries reduced to scratchy whimpers that still carried an edge of panic. His eyes were swollen, his lashes clumped together with dried tears. As Ruby lifted the mattress, a familiar smell hit her, not the sweet, milky scent of baby sleep, something chemical, sharp. She pressed the clean white sheet to her nose and inhaled. The lavender detergent the Millers used was expensive and eco-friendly, according to the label. But for a baby whose skin already showed a faint rash, for lungs that had screamed for hours, that perfumed cloud was an invisible storm. Her gaze shifted to the row of formula cans again. She picked one up, turning it slowly, reading every word this time. Not the big print on the front, the tiny letters in the ingredients list. There it was. Whey protein concentrate, milk solids, casein. Her heart lurched. She reached for another can labeled sensitive. Different colors, same tiny words, milk, milk, milk. Malik's face flashed in her mind, the night his lips had turned blue because his swollen throat had finally said enough asterisk to the milk everyone swore was safe. Ruby shut her eyes for a second. This house had doctors, consultants, and charts, but no one had taken the time to read the smallest print on the back of a can. Was Noah's tiny body fighting a war inside itself every time they fed him? If she walked downstairs right now and told Amanda and Christopher that everything they'd been pouring into their son in desperate love might be exactly what was hurting him, would they finally listen to the cleaning lady? Or would they cling even harder to their experts, and in doing so, hold their screaming child right over the edge of a cliff they refused to see? That afternoon, Ruby watched the clock like it owed her money. Every 3 hours on the dot, someone fed Noah. Sometimes it was Amanda, sometimes Christopher, sometimes whichever temporary helper had been hired to bridge the gap while they searched for a new full-time nanny. Every time, the same ritual, bottle from the warmer. Shaking it, testing a drop on the wrist, carrying it into the nursery like it was salvation. Every time, the same outcome, 20 minutes of exhausted, desperate sucking, 10 minutes of uneasy quiet. And then, like some cruel alarm had been set inside his stomach, the screaming started again. Ruby witnessed one of those feedings from the hallway, pretending to dust a framed modern art piece that looked to her like someone had just spilled paint. Inside the nursery, Christopher cradled Noah in his arms, dark circles under his eyes. "You're okay, buddy," he whispered. "This is the good stuff. Imported, special, the doctor approved." The baby's fingers clutched at his father's collar. He swallowed greedily, eyes half closed, already exhausted from a life that felt like one long battle. Ruby's grip on her duster tightened until her knuckles ached. Good stuff. She thought of the word milk asterisk on the back of the can. Thought of Malik's chart at the clinic, where they had underlined asterisk, lactose intolerance asterisk, and protein allergy, and then shrugged when she'd asked if formula was safe because, what else are you going to feed him? Her instincts screamed at her. But instincts didn't pay rent. Instincts didn't erase the decades of being told she was just a cleaner, just a mother, just a woman who loved too loudly and questioned too much. That evening, she found herself alone in the laundry room, folding a stack of impossibly tiny clothes. Her fingers ran over the soft cotton of Noah's pajamas, pausing where the seams met his skin. The tags were stiff, scratchy. She imagined them rubbing against his rash all night, every night as he thrashed. Small things, always small things. The washing machine beeped. She opened it and was hit again by that overwhelming scent, chemical lavender and manufactured freshness that clung to every fiber. Something inside her snapped. She grabbed one of Noah's onesies from the next load, and instead of pouring in the usual blue detergent, she reached under the sink for the unmarked bottle she'd brought from home, plain, unscented soap she used for her own skin, cheap but gentle. It felt like a tiny rebellion, a ridiculous, laughable act against the empire of experts that ruled this house. But it was something she could control. The next day, when she dressed Noah in that one different onesie while Amanda was on a business call and the temporary helper scrolled on her phone, Ruby watched closely. He still fussed, still whimpered. But his hands didn't scratch at his neck as desperately. His cheeks looked a shade less angry. Coincidence? Maybe. Then lunchtime came. As Ruby wiped down the kitchen island, she saw the nanny for the day measure out formula. Her eyes flicked to the back of the can in that now familiar guilty habit. Milk, always milk. The woman set the bottle on the counter, then turned away to answer a text. Ruby's gaze slid to the pantry. On the bottom shelf, almost hidden behind stacks of organic crackers, sat something she'd noticed on her first day. A forgotten bag of rice cereal, untouched because some article online had probably said it wasn't trendy anymore. In her mother's kitchen, plain rice had calmed many crying babies when milk did not. Her heart thudded. She shouldn't. She really, really shouldn't. Her hand moved anyway. She scooped a tiny spoonful of rice cereal into a clean mug, added warm water from the kettle, stirring until it formed a thin, simple gruel. No milk, no additives, just bland, old-fashioned comfort. She heard Amanda's voice upstairs. The nanny laughed at something on her phone. The bottle of formula sat there, a ticking time bomb in glass. Ruby poured it down the sink. Her hands shook as she replaced it with the rice mixture in a different bottle. She knew she was crossing a line that could get her fired on the spot, but she thought of Malik, of allergies dismissed, of a lifetime's worth of your overreacting, Ruby. No, she whispered to herself, not this time. She carried the bottle upstairs, her heart hammering so loudly she was sure someone would hear it. Inside the nursery, the nanny looked up, annoyed. Oh, thanks, she said, taking the bottle without even checking it. You're a lifesaver. Ruby's stomach flipped at the word. She watched as the nanny settled into the rocking chair and offered the bottle to Noah. He latched, greedy, hungry. He drank. Ruby counted his swallows in her head. 10, 15, 20, no gagging, no grimace. His body slowly unwound, his fists unclenching one finger at a time. Halfway through, his eyelids began to droop. His sucking slowed, turned lazy, content. The nanny yawned. Finally, she muttered, maybe I'll get to pee in peace today. 15 minutes later, for the first time since Ruby had walked into that house, the screaming didn't return on schedule. The house was quiet, breathless, waiting quietly. Ruby stood frozen in the hallway, hands pressed to her apron. What had she just done? Had she helped him or put him at risk by playing doctor when she wasn't one? If you were in Ruby's shoes, knowing what she knew, seeing what she'd seen, asterisk, would you have dared to change that bottle, or would you have left it alone and lived with the guilt? Tell me in the comments whose side you're on. As the minutes ticked by and the quiet stretched, the truth grew heavier. When Amanda eventually found out, would she see this silence as a miracle or a betrayal? The spell broke sooner than Ruby hoped. 2 hours later, the temporary nanny came downstairs with wide eyes. He's asleep, she announced, stunned. Like, actually asleep. I put him down and he just stayed asleep. Amanda dropped her phone mid-text. What do you mean asterisk stayed asleep? She demanded, already on her feet. For how long? Almost an hour and a half now, the nanny said, checking the time. I kept waiting for the usual horror show, but nothing. Amanda didn't respond. She just bolted for the stairs. Ruby followed at a distance, her heart pounding. In the nursery, Noah lay on his back, one tiny hand thrown over his head, lips parted in that slack, peaceful way only sleeping toddlers had. His chest rose and fell in an even rhythm. No whimpers, no flinches. Amanda's hand flew to her mouth. Tears filled her eyes so fast they spilled over before she could stop them. Oh my God, she whispered. Oh my God, look at him. He's resting, Ruby said softly, unable to keep the emotion out of her voice. Christopher appeared behind them moments later, tie loosened, hair mussed. What's going on? He asked, then stopped dead when he saw his son. They stood there side by side, two millionaires staring at the simplest miracle in the world, a quiet child. How? Christopher finally asked, turning to the nanny. What did you do differently? The nanny opened her mouth, closed it, and frowned. Nothing, she said slowly. Same schedule, same nap time. I gave him his bottle and… What bottle? Amanda cut in. The formula, the doctor's one. The nanny pointed toward the kitchen vaguely. The one on the counter. It was already made when I came down. I just brought it up. 4 pairs of eyes turned toward Ruby. The blood drained from her face. Amanda's voice sharpened. Ruby, did you make the bottle? Ruby swallowed. Yes, ma'am. I did. What did you put in it? Christopher's tone was calm, but there was a dangerous edge underneath. Ruby took a breath she hoped would steady her. Not the formula, she admitted. I used rice cereal, just a little. With warm water, no milk. Silence hit the room like a slap. You what? Amanda's whisper was more frightening than a shout. You changed his food without asking us. Without talking to his doctor. I know I overstep, Ruby rushed, words tumbling. I'm sorry, it's just, I saw how he cried after the formula, how his belly is hard like stone, how he scratched his neck. My own baby, he had trouble with milk, and nobody listened, and this is not about your baby, Christopher snapped, then winced at his own harshness. He scrubbed a hand over his face. You don't get to experiment on our son. Experiment, the word sliced through Ruby. I wasn't trying to experiment, sir. I was trying to see if he could rest without pain, she said, voice trembling but steady. 2 hours now he is sleeping. That never happens with the formula, right? Amanda hesitated. It was true, they all knew it, but truth and fear made uneasy neighbors. What if he's allergic to rice? What if I don't know, threw off his nutrition? She stammered. We hired specialists for a reason. We follow their plan for a reason. Ma'am, with respect, Ruby said quietly, their plan was to make him scream himself hoarse every day. Maybe it's time to question the plan. That was it. The invisible line fully crossed. Get out, Amanda whispered, her voice shaking. Get out of this room. Get out of my sight before I say something I can't take back. Ruby's chest constricted. She nodded, backing away, eyes burning, heart somewhere on the nursery floor beside the crib. Downstairs, she leaned against the cool kitchen counter, fighting the urge to cry. You knew better, she scolded herself. You knew they'd react like this. Rich people didn't like being told their expensive solutions were part of the problem, especially not by the woman cleaning their toilets. Yet upstairs, above the anger and fear, a toddler still slept. Hours later, long after her shift should have ended, Ruby sat on the back steps, staring at the sunset bleeding into the horizon. The screen door creaked. Christopher stepped out, tie gone, sleeves rolled up. He didn't look like a CEO now. He looked like a man whose life had been slowly unraveling. He stood there for a moment, then sank onto the step beside her, leaving a polite gap of space. He slept for 3 hours, he said quietly, not looking at her. 3 straight. Ruby didn't trust herself to speak. When he woke up, he laughed. Christopher's voice cracked on the word. We've barely heard him laugh in months. He ran his hands over his blanket like he was discovering it, and then he reached for his mother. Actually reached for her, not out of panic, just because. Ruby gripped the edge of the stair. I'm glad, she whispered. He sighed, a sound heavy with more than exhaustion. You broke our trust, he said. You know that, right? You put something in our son's body without asking us. If anything had gone wrong, I know, Ruby said, and I'm sorry, truly. I couldn't watch him hurt and do nothing. He was quiet for a long time. The worst part, he finally admitted, voice low, is that part of me is more angry that you might be right, then you broke the rules. He looked at her then, eyes searching. You think it's the milk, he said, more a statement than a question. I think it could be, Ruby replied. The crying, the gas, the rash, the way he calms when he doesn't get it. It sounds like an allergy to me. But I'm not a doctor, sir. I'm just a woman who has seen this before. He exhaled slowly. Tomorrow, he said, I'm taking him to a different pediatrician, one who doesn't charge more to say less. I want you to write down everything you've seen, every little thing, food, sleep, how he scratches, how he cries, all of it. Ruby blinked. You want me to come? No, he said. Amanda would have a stroke if I invited you to the appointment. He managed a tired half smile. But I want your observations, your instincts, call it data, if that makes it easier for me to explain to my wife. Something loosened in Ruby's chest. Thank you, sir, she said quietly. He stood, hand on the doorknob. And Ruby, he added, almost as an afterthought, whatever happens, I need you to know, if our son gets better because of something you saw that we didn't, I won't forget it. The door clicked shut behind him. High above, in a nursery that had never known peace until today, a little boy finally slept without pain gnawing at his insides. Would the new doctor listen to a millionaire father parroting the suspicions of his cleaning lady? Or would the weight of degrees and pride once again bury the smallest, truest clue that could save a child's life? The new doctor's office smelled like lemon and money. Leather chairs, designer toys in the waiting room, soft jazz instead of screaming kids' shows on the TV. Christopher sat stiffly in one of the chairs, Noah in his lap. The boy was calmer these days, less screaming, more cautious curiosity, but there were still shadows under his eyes, small flinches when a sound was too sharp or a smell too strong. In Christopher's hand was a folded piece of notebook paper. Ruby's handwriting covered it, small and careful, every line a record of hurt. Feeds at 8 a.m. Crying begins 20 minutes after. Gas, knees pulled up, scratching neck. Burps when held upright, soothed on belly. Rash worse after bath with lavender soap. Better in unscented onesie. Rice cereal, crying reduced, longer sleep, less scratching. He handed it to the doctor when she walked in. She was polished, confident. Her smile was practiced, but not unkind. I had one of our staff print out the previous reports from your other pediatricians, she said, taking a seat. He certainly had quite the workup. Christopher nodded. Something isn't right, and we feel like everyone keeps telling us he's fine because the tests are fine. He hesitated, then unfolded the paper and slid it across the desk. These are additional observations from someone in our home who spends a lot of time around him. The doctor glanced at the handwriting, brows lifting slightly. The nanny, she asked. The cleaner, Christopher corrected. If the doctor was surprised, she hid it well. HM, she murmured, scanning the list. Well, this is actually very detailed. She began to ask questions then, real questions, follow-ups. She examined the rashes Ruby had described, pressed gently on Noah's belly, and listened to his breathing. An hour later, the word *allergy* was no longer a theory. It was on a printed report with highlighted sections. Milk protein sensitivity, likely intolerance. I'm honestly surprised no one caught this sooner, the doctor admitted. The signs are all here, but sometimes when you're looking for big, dramatic diagnoses, you miss the smaller, more common ones. Smaller, common. Ruby would have laughed at the irony if she'd been there. Christopher walked out of the office, carrying more than a prescription for a new, truly hypoallergenic formula. He carried validation, proof that the instincts of a woman who scrubbed his floors were worth more than the opinions of people who billed by the minute. Back at the house, changes began. The milk-based formulas disappeared from the pantry, replaced by new cans with shorter ingredient lists. The fancy lavender baby wash went into the trash, swapped for unscented bars that cost a fraction as much. The first week on the new regimen, Noah's crying dropped by half. By the second week, he slept 4 hours at a stretch, sometimes 5. The dark circles under Amanda's eyes lightened. Christopher laughed more, a sound that had almost become a stranger in the house. But even as one storm began to clear, another cloud lingered. Ruby noticed it in the way Noah flinched at certain times, not when he ate, but when the house itself moved. Every time the air conditioning kicked on, his shoulders jerked. His little hands flew up as if to protect his face. Sometimes, he woke from a dead sleep the moment the vent above his crib rattled to life. At first, Ruby thought it was just the sound. Maybe he was sensitive to the mechanical hum. But one afternoon, while changing his sheets, she felt something odd. A faint, damp chill under her palm as she smoothed the fitted cover. A musty smell, barely there, but unmistakable to anyone who'd ever lived in a basement apartment. She looked up at the ceiling. The vent above the crib was ringed with the thinnest shadow, not dust, not quite. She dragged a chair over, climbed up carefully, her knees protesting. With a rag wrapped around her hand, she pushed open the vent grate. A puff of cold air hit her face, carrying a scent that took her straight back to the old building she'd grown up in, peeling paint, leaking pipes, and the black flowers that grew in the corners of damp ceilings. Mold, not much, not enough for a photo in a lawsuit commercial, but enough that every time the AC turned on, invisible spores puffed directly down onto Noah's face, onto his eyes, into his lungs. She lowered herself slowly, heart pounding for the 100th time in this house. Food had been one enemy. Was the air itself the next? Downstairs, Christopher and Amanda were arguing softly about whether to post a glowing review for the new doctor. Life was already pulling them back into its normal orbit now that the emergency alarm of constant screaming had dimmed. Would they want to hear that their fixed problem still had a hidden root? That the dream nursery they had poured so much money into was, quite literally, poisoning their child? The narrator might lean in here and say, if stories where the truth hides in plain sight keep you thinking long after the video ends, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss how this one turns out. Ruby stood in the center of the nursery, staring up at the vent. She could call a maintenance guy. She could quietly scrub what she could reach and hope it was enough. Or she could do what she was starting to realize she'd been brought into this house to do. Speak truth to people who had built entire lives on not hearing it. If she told the Millers about the mold, would they see her as a guardian angel or as the harbinger of yet another nightmare they didn't want to face? That evening, Ruby didn't wait for the right moment. In houses like this, the right moment never came. There was always a call, a meeting, a charity gala, a Pilates session. If she kept waiting, a quiet boy would keep breathing in poison. She found Amanda alone in the kitchen, staring blankly at a glass of wine she wasn't actually drinking. "Ma'am," Ruby said gently, "can I speak with you? It's important." Amanda looked up wary. Ever since the rice cereal incident, there had been a careful distance between them, even as Noah's improvement had forced gratitude to slip in at the edges. "Is everything okay with Noah?" she asked immediately, tension snapping back into her shoulders. "He is doing better," Ruby assured her, "much better, but I think there is still something bothering him." Amanda deflated. "Of course there is," she muttered. "It would have been too easy if one diagnosis fixed everything." Ruby took a breath. "I think there might be mold in the vent above his crib," she said. "I opened it today when I was cleaning. I smelled it. I saw a little, not a lot, but enough. Every time the air comes on, it blows right down on him." Silence. Of all the words she expected, panic, anger, questions, she hadn't expected laughter, but Amanda laughed. It was short, almost hysterical. "Mold," she said, shaking her head. "Of course, why not? We've had demon-possessed baby, allergy baby, and now mold baby. What's next? Haunted crib?" "It's not a joke, ma'am," Ruby said softly. "Mold can hurt little lungs, make breathing hard, make sleep bad, maybe even worse, skin rash. I've seen it before in old buildings." "Old buildings," Amanda repeated, glancing around her pristine, architect-designed kitchen. "Ruby, this house is 3 years old. We hired the best contractors in the state. We did a * home inspection. There is no way there's mold. We hired the best." Those words again. The altar they sacrificed their common sense on. "Sometimes, best on paper, not the best in the walls," Ruby replied. "Please, just have someone check, for him." Amanda's jaw clenched. You could see the war behind her eyes. On one side, pride in her house, in her decisions, in the life she'd curated like her Instagram feed. On the other, the memory of her son screaming until his voice broke. I'll talk to Christopher," she finally said, voice tight. "We'll see if it's worth having someone look." 3 days passed. No one came. The only things that moved were the vents cycling on and off, and Noah's little chest rising and falling under air that carried more than just cool relief. Ruby didn't press again, not out of fear, though that was always there, but because she knew something was shifting behind the scenes. On the morning of the 4th day, 2 white vans appeared in the driveway, logos for an environmental testing company on the sides. Men in coveralls carried in equipment that looked like it belonged in a science fiction movie. Ruby watched from the shadows as Amanda directed them upstairs. Christopher hovered, arms folded, trying to look calm and rational while his leg bounced. Hours later, the verdict arrived. "Yes, there's mold," the inspector said, pointing to color-coded charts like a weather forecaster predicting a storm. "Not everywhere, but the nursery vent is one of the worst spots. The placement of the HVAC system and the way condensation builds up in that part of the house created a perfect little pocket for growth." Amanda's face was drained of color. "How bad is it?" she asked. "For an adult, probably just irritating," the inspector said. "For a baby whose immune system is still developing, not ideal. It could absolutely contribute to sleep disturbances, respiratory issues, even skin reactions." Every word was a knife point of confirmation. Ruby stood in the doorway, unseen but seeing. The inspector continued, "You'll need remediation in that part of the system. In the meantime, I strongly recommend moving your child to a different room to sleep." Silence rippled through the room. The nursery had been Amanda's project, her pride. Months of Pinterest boards, custom furniture, hand-picked paints in soothing, expensive shades. Move him, those 2 words cost more emotionally than any bill the company handed over. That night, for the first time, Noah's crib was dragged down the hall into the guest room. The walls, they were plain. The furniture is generic. No mural of clouds, no hand-woven rug from Morocco, just clean, dry air. Ruby helped set up the new space, her movements careful, almost reverent. As she tucked the sheet over the mattress, she caught Amanda watching her. "You were right, again," Amanda said quietly. "No sharp edges this time, just tired honesty. About the milk, about the mold, How did you even see it, smell it? Ruby shrugged, feeling suddenly shy. When you don't have money, ma'am, you learn to notice what is free, smell, sound, how a baby cries, how walls feel when you touch them. Rich people, you pay other folks to notice. So sometimes no one really does. Amanda flinched, not because it was an insult, but because it was true. She sank onto the edge of the bed. When I was pregnant, she said slowly, staring at the floor, I bought every gadget. Every monitor. I had spreadsheets for sleep training, feeding schedules. I watched all the experts online. I thought, if I just did everything right, if I just followed the plan, I could guarantee he'd be okay. Her voice wobbled. And then he screamed, and I felt like he was personally rejecting me, like he knew how hard I'd worked and he was punishing me for something. Ruby's heart ached. Sometimes, she said, they do not reject us. They begged us, but we are so busy feeling like we are failing, we don't listen to what they are saying. Amanda looked up, eyes shining. You lost a child, didn't you? She asked softly. You don't have to tell me, but I see it. In the way you look at him. Ruby stared at her hands. Yes, she whispered, I did. What happened? Amanda's question trembled with something that hadn't been there before, humility. A lot of small things, Ruby said. Little sickness here, rash there, crying doctors say it was fussiness. I was young, poor, they didn't listen till it was too late. Amanda closed her eyes, tears spilling over. I am so sorry, she breathed. Ruby nodded, swallowing around the lump in her throat. I can't change what happened to my boy, she said, but maybe I can help you not go through the same thing, if you let me. Amanda's answer was immediate. We need you, she said simply, not just to clean, to see the things we can't seem to see, to hear what we've been too scared to hear. Later, long after they'd laid Noah in his new, plain crib, long after he'd fallen asleep with only a small, contented sigh, Amanda stood in the doorway with Christopher. He looks peaceful, Christopher murmured. He looks like our son, Amanda replied. Both of them knew they hadn't gotten here alone. Would they truly welcome Ruby into their decision-making circle now, beyond the quick bursts of crisis? Or once the emergencies faded, would old habits, of hierarchy, of silence, of not really seeing her, slide back into place and push her right back into the shadows? Weeks passed. For the first time since Noah's birth, the Miller mansion found a rhythm that wasn't set to the tempo of screaming. The new formula settled in his belly like a friend instead of a fight. The guest room, with its boring walls and lack of expensive decor, became the quiet center of the home. Laughter, small at first, like it was afraid to be too loud, began to return. Noah discovered the joy of banging pots in the kitchen while Ruby mopped. He toddled after her down the hall, tiny feet slapping the wood, his giggles echoing in spaces once filled with raw, aching cries. You've created a monster, Christopher joked one afternoon as another saucepan clanged to the floor. Ruby smiled. Better noisy happy than noisy hurting, she said. One evening, Amanda pulled Ruby aside. We've been talking, she began, fingers twisting in the hem of her sweater. Christopher and I, Ruby's stomach tightened. Those words could mean anything in a house like this. We want to offer you a different position, Amanda continued. Not just cleaning, a hybrid I guess, house manager, and I don't know what to call the other part. Guardian angel, baby whisperer. She laughed softly at her own joke. We want you to be officially part of Noah's care team. To be with him when we can't be, to help us notice what we miss. We'd pay you a salary that reflects that. Benefits, time off, whatever you need. Ruby's first instinct was a flood of relief, stability, respect. All the things she'd scraped for, job to job, for years. Then, just as quickly, another feeling rose, fear, not of the work. She had already been doing it. Of the weight. To attach herself this deeply to another child, after losing her own, was a risk she wasn't sure her heart could survive. I don't know, ma'am, she admitted. I clean a lot of houses, help my sister with her kids. I like going home at night and leaving other people's mess where it belongs. Amanda winced, recognizing the double meaning. We wouldn't ask you to give up your life, she said quickly. We can't imagine going back to how things were before you came, and we know we still have blind spots. We don't want to miss something else, because we were too proud to ask for help. Ruby looked toward the guest room, where Noah slept with his arm wrapped around a battered stuffed elephant she'd stitched back together with old thread. She thought of Malik, of hospital beeps, of a tiny coffin. She thought of how, when Noah looked at her now, it wasn't with the wild, panicked eyes of a child in constant pain. It was with the open, bright gaze of a boy who knew he was safe. If she stepped fully into this role, would she be doing it for Noah, or for the part of her that still woke at night reaching for a baby who wasn't there? That night, sleep didn't come easily. Ruby lay awake, staring at the cracks in the ceiling of her small staff room, tracing them like roads on a map of a life she'd never quite been given permission to fully live. The next morning, a new complication arrived. An email from yet another specialist, this one highly recommended by Amanda's social circle, offered conflicting advice. The allergy diagnosis is likely overblown, the message read. Many children test with sensitivities they outgrow. Strict avoidance can create psychosomatic dependence. Reintroducing dairy under controlled circumstances is perfectly safe. Amanda read it aloud at the breakfast table, frowning. So which is it? She demanded, slapping the printed email down. Allergy, no allergy, maybe allergy, pretend allergy. I'm so tired of everyone disagreeing. Christopher rubbed his temples. He's better now, he said slowly. Maybe we don't need to poke the bear. But what if this doctor is right and we're babying him? Amanda shot back. What if we turn him into one of those kids who can't eat anything at birthday parties and we've limited his life because of overcaution? Their voices rose and fell while Noah happily smeared avocado on his haicha tray, oblivious. In the doorway, Ruby listened, jaw tight. Once again, two worlds were colliding. The world of people who debated his life over lattes and the world of a child whose body simply reacted without politics or pride. Later, when the argument had cooled into a chilly silence, Christopher found Ruby in the garden, trimming dead leaves from a rose bush. "What do you think?" he asked abruptly. She paused, clippers in midair. "About what, sir? About this new doctor, about reintroducing dairy, about all of it." She set the clippers down, wiped her hands on her apron. "I think, when he had milk, he screamed like he was dying," she said. "When he stopped, he slept. He laughed. He learns new things. I don't need a paper to tell me what my eyes and ears see, but he is your son, your decision." Christopher stared at the ground. "I used to think being a good father meant providing everything," he said. "Big house, best schools, best doctors. Now I'm realizing maybe it also means knowing when to say no to people in white coats and yes to people in aprons." He looked up, something like resolve hardening in his expression. "We're not bringing back the milk," he decided. "Not now, maybe not ever. I'd rather be the dad who overprotected his kid's stomach than the one who ignored his screams." Ruby exhaled, tension easing from her shoulders. He hesitated. "As for the job offer," he added, "we meant what we said, but we understand if it's too much, if it hurts too close to home. Just know the door is open. For you, it will always be open here." Ruby nodded slowly. "I'll think about it," she promised. That night she watched Noah toddle across the living room rug, his steps wobbly but determined. He fell, laughed, got back up. Something inside Ruby softened, then steeled. She thought of all the people like her in houses like this, invisible until the moment they were needed, then forgotten again as soon as the crisis passed. She thought of Malik's name on a weathered headstone and how no one outside her family even knew he had existed. If she stayed, if she really stayed, maybe she could make sure this child didn't become another story of what if. If you were in Ruby's position, carrying grief in one hand and a second chance in the other, would you protect your heart and walk away, or risk breaking it again by stepping fully into this new family's life? Tell me in the comments what choice you'd make. By dawn, as the first light filtered through the guest room blinds onto Noah's sleeping face, Ruby had made her decision. Was the unexpected role she was about to accept going to heal her, or finally ask more of her than she had left to give? Ruby didn't announce her decision with fanfare. She simply walked into the kitchen one morning, hands folded, heart steady. "Ma'am, sir," she said when Amanda and Christopher both looked up. "If the offer still stands, I'd like to take the job. Not just cleaning, helping with Noah, with the house, with seeing what needs to be seen." Amanda was on her feet before Ruby finished the sentence, wrapping her in an embrace so sudden it stole her breath. "Thank you," she whispered fiercely. "You have no idea what this means to us." Ruby hugged her back, a little awkward, a lot overwhelmed. Maybe she thought she did know, because she knew what it meant to her too. The next months unfolded like a slow, gentle sunrise. With the screaming gone and the mold remediated, the house began to feel less like a museum and more like a home. Furniture rearranged itself around forts built from cushions. Crystal vases made way for sippy cups. Ruby's days shifted. She still cleaned, old habits died hard, and she took pride in a gleaming floor. But between scrubbing and sweeping, she also taught Noah to stack blocks, to say please and thank you, to blow kisses, and eventually to say her name in that sweet, toddler-mangled way. "Ruby," he'd chant, arms up, demanding to be picked up. Some nights, when storms rattled the windows and thunder threatened to wake him, it wasn't Amanda's sleep app or Christopher's playlist that soothed him. It was Ruby's old lullabies, sung in a voice cracked by years and healed by use. One afternoon, as they sat on the floor together, Noah nestled against her side with a picture book. Amanda watched from the doorway. "He looks at you like you're home," she said softly. Ruby smiled, a little sad, a little joyful. "Home is not always a place," she replied. "Sometimes it is a person who hears your cry when no one else does." Word spread beyond the house, as it always did. At first in whispers, "The miller's impossible child, he's an angel now, they got some miracle nanny or something." Then, in more concrete ways, a friend of Amanda's called, desperate about her own colicky infant. "Can I talk to your Ruby?" she asked, voice trembling. Soon it wasn't just rich women. Miss Green's niece, the gardener's grandson, a cashier from the grocery store who'd heard rumors and swallowed her pride. One by one, people started to appear at the back door, babies in arms, dark circles under their eyes. Ruby never turned anyone away. She'd hold their children, listen to their cries, teach parents to watch, to notice, to trust what they saw even when professionals dismissed them. She never called herself an expert. She called herself what she was. Someone who had learned, at a terrible cost, how to hear pain beneath sound. One day, Christopher came home with a folder. "What's that?" Amanda asked, wiping mashed peas off the counter. He laid it down, flipping it open. "Papers to set up a foundation," he said. "In Malik's name." Ruby froze. She hadn't expected to ever hear her son's name in this house, spoken with such care. "A foundation," she echoed. "For parents who can't afford 10 doctors," Christopher explained. "For environmental testing in old apartment buildings. For second opinions on colic that lasts too long. For more training, Rubies." His smile was gentle. "We have the money," he said simply. "You have the eyes, the ears, the heart. We want to put all of that together, if you'll help us." Tears blurred Ruby's vision. Her boy's life, her darkest story, being turned into light for someone else's child. That would make his name mean something," she whispered. "It already does," Amanda said, "to us." In the months that followed, the foundation grew, quietly at first, then with momentum. There were no glossy ads, no high-profile galas. Just families whose babies finally slept. Kids who stopped wheezing when mold was cleaned out of vents no inspector had bothered to open. Toddlers whose rashes faded when someone read the back of a label all the way down to the fine print. Ruby still wore her apron, still rode the bus home some nights when she wanted to sleep in her own bed instead of the staff room, but something fundamental had changed. She was no longer invisible. Her suggestions were not old wives' tales whispered at the edge of polished conversations. They were sought out, written down, implemented. And every time a parent called to say, "He's better, she's sleeping." They laugh now. Ruby would close her eyes, whisper Malik's name, and feel the ache in her chest soften into something almost like peace. In a different kind of story, the narrator might stop here and say, "If you want more stories like this, where the smallest people and the quietest voices change everything, hit that subscribe button so you're here for the next one." Because in lives like these, there is always a next one, another cry, another choice, another chance to listen. One evening, as the sun dipped low and the nursery turned guest room turned safe haven golden, Noah climbed into Ruby's lap, his blue eyes clear and bright. "Ruby," he asked. Yes, baby, why did you come? His question was simple, sincere. Why had she come up those stairs, that first screaming day? Ruby thought of all the reasons she could give. Because she needed a job. Because the sound of his cry matched a ghost she carried. Because silence in the face of suffering felt heavier than any risk. She smoothed a hand over his soft hair. Because I heard you, she said. And once you hear a cry like that, you can't unhear it. He leaned his head against her chest, listening to the steady beat of a heart that had broken and kept going. Somewhere in the distance, a baby in another house began to wail, its voice muffled by walls and pride and fear and all the things that keep us from truly listening. Would someone like Ruby hear them? And in your own life, whose quiet crying, of a child, a partner, a parent, a friend, have you walked past without really hearing? And what might change if, this time, you stopped and truly listened?